7th, 2022. I call the Finance Committee meeting to order. First item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from November the 30th meeting. If everybody's had an opportunity to look at them, if anybody sees any omissions, changes, deletions, additions, if not, do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimous. Next item on our agenda is the school department. Mr. Lucas, Superintendent, you're here to present your request for FY24.
That is correct.
And I think it basically focuses on roofs.
That
There
is
are other
correct.
items, but I see that you're indicating that you're going to fund those either through the revolving accounts that you have or grants.
That is correct.
So our focus is on Barton Street, Chafee, and the high school roof request.
Correct.
All right?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Mike Lucas, Superintendent of Schools. This is Joe Scanlon, our Interim School Business Manager, Director of Operations. Thank you for listening to us tonight. We're here to talk about roofs, as Mr. Yule said. At Chafee, Barton, and the high school, the middle school roof is okay. We're in good shape there, but the other three schools need some work. We'd like to thank the committee, first of all, for last year's support of our siding work that's being done at the elementary schools. We're working with DPW to have that done this year, so we're very appreciative of that. The next hurdle for us will be the roof. So we're here to talk about that tonight. And please stop me at any time if you have questions. Obviously, ensuring that our school facilities are safe and healthy is paramount, especially when buildings may be in need of roof replacement. Our school buildings are in good condition, and those signals to students and staff that there's a positive and supportive environment for learning, and that's what we hope for all of our kids. Obviously, our major concerns with our roofs is to avoid water damage in the school interior, increase our energy efficiency, and reduce roof repairs and needed costs going for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So we're looking at that for our schools going forward. Obviously, new roofs, that's a big investment for us as a town. We understand that. But by replacing the roofs, the town can extend the lifespan of the school buildings, and it's really important to protect our assets, that we want to do that. Schools help increase property values. It's good for everybody. We want to welcome families to our community and expand our enrollment as much as we can. And obviously, our community uses our schools very active with youth leagues, athletics, all kinds of fundraisers. We want to ensure that we can still offer that for our community going forward as well. So based on a professional roof assessment survey conducted by a qualified roofing inspector, we are proposing complete roof replacements for both elementary schools and a partial replacement for a section of the roof at Oxford High School. And we're going to look at Chafee first, which currently services grades K, 1, and 2. We have a newer section of roof that is 20 years old and an older section that is 32 years old. The estimated cost to replace this entire roof is $1,085,000. That building currently services 55 staff and 293 students. That old section of roof was installed in 1990. The newer section was installed in 2003. Then I've got a bunch of pictures. I want to thank Mr. Justin Ledoux, who was our former business manager and is now the assistant town manager. He took a lot of these pictures over the last couple of years in building walks and as issues arose and leaks penetrated the building in the schools. So he took a lot of these with his cell phone and helped prepare this. So you can see there's sections. The easiest way it shows up is either the ceiling looks wet or the ceiling tiles that have to be replaced. That's pretty common. There's different places. Different parts of the building, media center, library, office, and the media center, the gymnasium hallway, and that's for Chafee. And you have those pictures in your packet as well. The next school is Barton, we're going to talk about. It's in a similar condition. There's an older section of roof that was installed 32 years ago in 1990, a newer section that was installed in 2003. Cost is $1.3 million, 53 staff working there, 273 students currently enrolled there in grades pre-K 3 and 4. Again, that entire roof needs to be done. Here are some more pictures. Middle hallway outside room D20. Main hallway outside the cafeteria. And this is our major leaking point that we see a lot. Mr. Yule, I know you joined us for our walkthrough. We talked about this in both Chafee and Barton. This is the most common area, is that main hallway when you enter the buildings next to the cafeteria. Those are the cafeteria ceiling tiles. You can see there in your pictures. Main entrance again near the expansion joint, outside the stage door. Receiving room hatch, the kitchen hallway. Gymnasium hallway again in this building as well as at Chafee, both buildings. inside the girls' restroom roof there, media center in the library again, staff dining area, and storage room, main hallway. And that brings us to the high school. The high school, we're looking to replace a section installed in 2004. It's about 26,000 square feet. It would cost about $1 million, $60,000, $1,060,000, I apologize. We currently have 81 staff at the high school and 386 students. And it's primarily the section that's over the gym and the auditorium, as you'll see from the pictures here. The auditorium is in rough shape, the roof on the auditorium. Here are the student council rooms, the accompanying hallway as well, what we call B hallway. You can see those roofs in there, ceilings in there. Staff lounge, storage closet. The auditorium ceiling panels, this is a major concern of ours right now, that we have leaks on them, and you can see the spotting in there. Those are sound panels for performances in the auditorium, where we host obviously town meetings and other things, so very important. So you can see those spots there. The damage and staining that's being caused. Ceiling panels, some leaks back in the lighting. Auditorium hallway and the media center ceiling. Any questions so far?
I have a quick question on the,
Yep.
on the numbers. Does that include replacing the tiles inside, or is that just the roof, those numbers?
That's just the roof. That's, our custodians work to replace the tiles regularly. So really, the cost that we're proposing tonight for $3.5 million total is to replace the roof, the shingles.
Have you heard anything from the Mass School Building Authority as far as what money they would be willing to?
Yes, we have, so I'm ready to talk about that. So to assist with funding of the Chafee and Barton projects, the Oxford School Committee, with the support of the Board of Selectmen, submitted a statement of interest for each elementary school to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, also known as the MSBA. And that was in February of 2022, seeking participation in the Accelerated Roof Repair Program. So fortunately, October 26th, we got some really good news, that they've accepted us into the next stage, and it's clear to point out there are stages to this that you have to meet and agree with them, and then they let you go on to the next stage. So the Board of Directors voted to invite the town of Oxford into the Accelerated Repair Program to partner with the MSBA in conducting a schematic design study at the Alfred M. Chafee School for potential partial roof replacement project, and at the Clara Barton School for a potential partial roof replacement project. So they are willing, the 30-year-old sections of roof fall under this accelerated roof program. That's it. The rest would be up to us. But they will reimburse us up to 80% of the 30-year-old sections of the roof.
80%.
If we meet approval. The school committee is willing to fund the cost of the schematic design study from a revolving account. But we're really asking for, if we make through that stage, we'll work with MSBA. They give us somebody who works with us on that. We'll pay for that initial cost. If we move on to the next stage, we would then need approval from the town to fund through debt probably for the rest of the funds, for $3.5 million.
It would be for the 2003 sections.
Correct, in addition, correct, and the section at the high school. So here it's all laid out. If you look at the cost, Mr. Yule, as you were just asking. So, and Joe and I have run the numbers and talked about it. We estimate it would be approximately $655,000 that MSBA would cover for us of the 30-year-old roofs at Chafee and Barton. And this you can see from the numbers on this sheet here, and it's in your packet. If we do get the MSBA, the total cost is $2.8 million. If we don't get it, it's $3.5 million for the roofs.
Okay. Now, I was looking at the Garland report,
Yep,
the old one from 2020, and the
Yep.
new one that Justin had updated in the summer.
yes,
I noted that in 2 years, from what they proposed cost to be, to
Yep.
where 2 years now, 2024,
Right.
had gone up by $1,207,000, or almost 19%.
yes,
So obviously, time is, with inflation,
Correct.
is a huge factor. and-
Correct.
And these are big numbers.
They are.
But in 2 years, they morphed into $1.2 million plus.
correct.
So time is a factor. I
Yes.
noted that. The other thing, looking at his report,
Yep,
we're ignoring, well, not ignoring, we're not including shingles going for 8,000 square feet being retrofitted to metal, both for Chafee and Barton Street, that he had projected costing on Barton 320 and on Chafee 250. And I noticed he also had a line item similar for 50,000 square feet of shingles going to metal on the high school, which would have been $2 million. So we're not, I'm looking at, so we're ignoring, his whole report covered
Correct.
a couple of things. It covered shingles, which totaled basically $2.5 million.
Right.
320 for Barton, 250 for Chafee, and $2 million for the high school. That comes to $2,570,000. And then he had wall panels, which were on his report, which aren't roof, but there were 82,000 respectively for both Clara Barton and for Chafee.
Correct.
And 30,000 for the high school, which totaled 194,000.
Right.
Now, and then, there was repairs in there for 60, but obviously if we replace the roof in 2024, we wouldn't be repairing it, that he had feathered in 60,000 at 25 and 60, 20, and each one of these.
Correct.
5,000 and 25 for Chafee, and then another in 26 and another in 27. The same thing with Barton. Well, that would all go away. If we replaced the roofs in 24, we wouldn't be repairing them. So that, there was another 60. And I tried to come up, because he had a total that he updated this summer of $7,568,000. Now, I don't know, we're only looking for 300, only, for $3.5 million.
Right.
We're only looking for half of that.
Correct.
But we're ignoring, there is a future here through, he has it through to 2027, basically another $3.5 million, either in shingles going to steel, 50,000 at the high schools, 8,000 at Chafee, 8,000 square feet at Barton, and panels for another 200,000, 194,000. So
Right.
we're, and the only reason I'm bringing it up, if we are gonna entertain borrowing money,
Yeah.
and we're looking to do something, instead of coming back in pieces and dribs and drabs, I'm assuming we're not, I don't know what our plans are, just, these buildings are, the main part of them are 70 years old. Then we have the
Right.
additions on both buildings, which
Right.
are about 20. Do we keep putting money into them with the foundations and the siding at some point? And then I don't know, I'm not an educator, but built in 54 and built in 55, are they configured for today's type of education and of the core of what you're trying to deliver both at these grade levels?
Yes, they are. For Chafee and Barton, yes.
They are,
They're
okay.
terrific for that age
For
group.
those grades?
Perfect.
See, I don't know.
Yeah, it's perfect for that age group.
Okay.
Yeah, both
So
buildings.
that we want to keep these buildings and supposed to replace them, is that what I'm
Correct.
hearing?
I would agree.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, I don't
Yeah.
know, that's why I'm asking.
Yes. Yeah, we absolutely want to keep them and keep them well and keep them dry for our kids and our
Okay.
staff, absolutely, but they're in pretty good shape otherwise.
Right. we
mentioned the
hope-
foundations,
yeah,
but the foundations also is the other
We're
concern.
hoping the foundation stays at 562.
Correct.
We had initially thought it was only going to be
Correct.
90.
Correct.
And we're keeping our fingers crossed on a siding for 468. We're hoping that when that comes off, there's nothing behind it that would
Correct. Yeah,
incur.
the next priority for us would be the foundations at Barton and Chafee, which
And-
you're aware of, we talked about on our walk.
Right.
We were gonna wait and ask for
FY
that next year,
yeah,
but if the
50,
town, if you
25.
guys decide we should work it all in and just get it done.
Well, that's my thought.
be
I
fine,
mean,
too.
I'm looking at all this stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely, I mean, when we look at capital requests, we look at stuff that's 200, 250. We're talking about a dump truck here.
Right.
A mower here, or something like that, or roads for $500,000.
Right.
We're talking I mean, we just had the presentation last week of the community center just to do a study.
Yeah.
It was $4 million, and they were projecting that the building, the old high school building.
Yeah.
That is now the
Where
community.
our office is.
Yeah, I know, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're the only floor on it that's currently up to date. The other two
It's
floors.
modernized, right.
Are modernized, right, with an elevator.
We're very fortunate.
Which we still owe money on, the elevator that we put in. And then my thought came in when I left the meeting last week. I said, geez, I wonder, we're doing all this stuff, we're gonna gut this building, we're gonna do all this, and it's $40 million plus the $4 million, so $45 million. I'm wondering, is one elevator gonna be enough? I mean, with all the way, how does this all shake out?
Yeah.
I know we're still paying on the $1 million, which included the elevator and the third floor and the windows and all that you now have,
Right.
operate from.
Yes.
I mean, these are huge numbers, and I don't know, if we're gonna, and we really, and I said this last week, a similar town, Webster, building a high school for $100 million. They're gonna be on the hook for half of that, $50 million, and I looked at our debt at the end of FY '23, in June 30th, this coming year. It's going to be about a little over 7 million, about 2 million and change in short, and 5 million. And then I'm seeing that they're going to incur, I don't know what their current debt is, but they're going to take on another 50 million. So in terms of our debt load, we're really conservative as for our town, our size, comparing ourselves to Webster. Not to say that we want to incur debt, but,
Right.
and I don't know what that would do to the taxpayers, but as far as rates and stuff. But these are all conversations, I mean, when we're looking at these kind of numbers,
Yeah.
that kind of like
Adds up quickly.
adds up quickly, and it goes beyond the finance committee. I mean, the
Yes.
board has, the Board of Selectmen and
Yep.
other boards, like your board and others, have to really put their heads together to come up with how we do this, put prioritize stuff, and what we can afford to do, and what we, as opposed to what we like to do.
Correct.
I'm just,
Yeah.
but I looked at his numbers, and so the one thing that hit me was the cost of the increase in 2 years of $1.2 million.
Right.
So dragging our heels on any of this stuff isn't going to bode well for us going
And the
forward.
leaks aren't going to go away. 'cause
They're
we're
not
dragging
going
our
to, on
heels.
any of this
Yeah.
stuff, if we're going to
So,
do it,
It's critical, yeah.
it's something we have to tackle.
And the question you're leading to, John, is whether it makes sense to include or forecast for a higher amount based on
Right,
a
I'm
necessary
wondering, I'm looking
repairs.
at this report, and I'm wondering, and I know when we did the walkthrough, and we were in the high school, in the metal roof section with the skylights.
Yep.
We saw erosion, deterioration, and other areas.
Yep.
That we thought maybe some caulking for the present, which is like this $5,000 here and $5,000, that the 60,000 dribs and
Right.
drabs.
Right.
Do some little Band-Aids on some of
Right.
these things, which he has in his report.
Right.
I don't know what the wall panels are, the 82 and 82, and the 30 in the high school, about 200,000. But in compared to everything else, that's like small potatoes, 200,000
Right.
versus almost 0.6 million.
Right.
It's just, so I'm scratching my head here. I mean, I physically have seen the damage that it's caused you and
Yes.
the inconvenience in moving, shifting things around and having to deal with the roof leaks. So I understand, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
But, so I'm trying to wonder, how do we approach this, is where I'm coming from, is where I'm coming to. How do we fund it, and how do we move forward, and like you said, borrowing is probably gonna be is the answer. Then the question comes up, all right, do we borrow half, basically, because he's got 7.6 million, and we're talking about three and a half, which is roughly half, but a little over, a little less, but, or do
Yeah.
we look at the whole thing?
Right.
Because he's projecting us out to 27, and we're talking 24, so we're talking 3 years.
Right.
Right.
Not a lot,
Right.
but in 2 years, it went up $1.2 million, so,
Right.
are
Yeah.
we our own enemy by ignoring it?
Right.
If I may make a suggestion, it's just an observer from the outside.
Sure.
Is, you're spot on. What your understanding is, that the reason that we're talking about this tonight is at some point in time, the school district has to say to MSBA, yeah, they got our back. The town's gonna afford some of it. So we're talking two different things here. So how we're funding the entire picture probably needs to fit into this picture, that we need to go back to MSBA and say, yes, they're gonna fund this small portion.
Yeah.
So it's two different things. We need to be able to do this
First.
at some point in time.
Right, we
first.
gotta show good faith, I understand that.
Right.
And it looks like borrowing, and of course, besides this board or committee, then the board, the select board, and others would have to chime in.
Yeah.
We need people that are going to carry the, spearhead this.
Yeah.
And it, obviously, to the community, it's gonna be a sell.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be supportive as we can. We're all for it. We feel like we really need it for our students and our staff. We have a couple school committee members here as well to show support. So it is a priority for us. We've got to protect our schools. If we have poor roofs, it's going to be tough to maintain what we've got. So, and bottom line, those buildings end up being town assets that we want to protect as well. So,
I wish we would have been, and I said this last week, if we'd have been 15 years ago, when you look at all these buildings, we got a town garage, we have your buildings.
Yeah.
We have a community center now, and everything is just kind of coming together at one time.
Yeah.
If we'd have been more diligent in borrowing some monies back in the day, 15 years ago, on some of these things. But now we're an aging community struggling to pay our taxes, seniors, and people want to do it, but maybe they can't see forest for the trees to do it, to vote for it, to support it,
Right.
you know?
Okay.
Yeah. It's just a lot, it's a lot. And now the community center, which
Right.
I don't disagree, we need a community center.
It's a lot, though. You're right, John. And thinking about the full picture of how we want to structure the borrowing, I think is really important also.
And there's a lot of things we can do. I mean, we talked to the DPW about lease purchase and stuff, because we're looking, you know, after town meeting, I have it here somewhere. We had in free cash, 3.1 million, and then we earmarked about 500,000. So we're left with about 2.6 million going into this year. But they're, you know, borrowing, some lease purchases on some of these requests, some grant monies and everything. So there's a lot of stuff we could probably, if we put our heads to it, and between now and May town meeting, come up with some ways to do a lot of this stuff. But some of it's going to require borrowing, and I think this would be an item that would fit that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions from the rest of the board?
I have a question about the foundations. Where do we stand with those currently? I know we had some funding for it and all that, and then there was some hiccups.
Yeah, our last estimate was $562,000, and basically the rebar is rusting and oxidating, which is causing expansion, and then water is creeping in through the cracks and the gaps in the concrete, and so it's not a safety hazard at all at this time. It's very cosmetic as we walked around it, but in a couple years, we're gonna have to have the foundation serviced.
And
And
it's
that-
actually footings, right? There isn't a basement in those schools?
Correct, correct.
These were the additions, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're 20-year-old additions on the 7-year-old buildings.
If you walk around either campus at Chafee or Barton, you can see it. You can see where it's cracking.
Yeah.
So, and then water is getting in there. In the winter, water gets in, freezes, and causes expansion in the
Expands.
concrete. So in some places, you've got some nasty cracks in there. In other places, it's not bad. But it is something we're gonna have to have fixed within the next 2 years.
And similar to the conversation about the siding, you know, with the roof, we don't know what's going to be structurally, if there's any damage. Is that true for the roof as well? We might get in there and start to replace things and there's a bigger issue?
We
Or
don't
do we know?
believe so, but
Okay.
fortunately, Mike Lupus is here also from DPW. I don't know, Mike, if you can talk to that at all, but I don't think we expect that, but
Okay,
I mean, underlayment,
Right,
when you start
exactly.
pulling stuff off.
Yeah.
you have to-
exactly, yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, they're not sure till they start cutting into it.
Exactly,
They won't
yeah.
know till they start investigating it. You know, the same with the siding, till they start removing the panels, they won't know.
Hard to plan for that.
I mean, originally, we thought 90,000 was going to do it, and I
Right.
was saying, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
right.
I know New England, in the 4
Yeah.
foot, you have to go down for frost. I thought it was going to be more money. I didn't know it was going to be 562,000, and now maybe even more.
Right, so what we're doing with the foundations, we have the engineering company going to do some core testing. Right, they're gonna test the
right.
concrete to see what compounds are in it, to see if that also sped up the deterioration. And they're making arrangements now with a company that does that. So within a short period of time from now, we should have some core samples done and results back on the type of concrete that they used. And that'll change the repair plan if they see that it's certain compounds in there,
For the foundations.
for the
Is that
foundations.
percolate stuff that you're
Yeah,
looking for? Whatever it is.
yeah, I forget the name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's possibly, could be some money or funding if there's a lawsuit pending. I
Everything that
not
I've
to get ahead of
researched,
ourselves, but there was,
well, everything I researched looked like the funding was for residential.
Oh,
I haven't found anything online, and I don't know if Mr. Scanlon found anything online either. He's the one that brought it to my attention. But everything I've researched looks like it was just, right now, for residential. I haven't found anything for commercial or, schools.
That's too bad.
well, let's hope it's not worse than
Yeah.
than it's already gotten to be. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
No, nothing further from me. Thank you.
John, Mark? No?
I think that's.
All right, well, it's a good presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight.
Yeah.
We appreciate your support.
Thank you for offering more money too.
No, I'm just saying, I'm looking at Garland's
recording,
report,
by
and then I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm saying, geez, in 2 years, it went up $1.2 million,
Yeah.
so
That's a lot.
let's take our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, next item on the agenda is the town manager.
Boy,
Yeah. You said it.
yes.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Good evening.
I feel like I'm kind of attached to this room from last night to tonight.
I'm sure.
It's, yes. Thank you. As usual, sometimes I'm sort of the backup hitter here, and after talking with Jared as we were going through our capital 5-year plans, one of the things that I've noticed is that we've been able to take off a list of things that the manager may have had that wasn't necessarily on the radar for some other folks. But this is something that has been on the radar for the town. As many of you know, we started an ADA commission, or Commission on Disability, and we've had a number of projects that we started to focus on, including making improvements to Jocelyn Park, and also we have focused here at Town Hall. Now, we had come before the Finance Committee, and talked about the need for looking at our ramps, both at the senior center and the town hall. We had, and I've given you some information, based on an architect to look at design in a phase 1 and 2 for making improvements to the back of this building and into the building. The last improvements for ADA accessibility was done in the early 1990s. And if anybody has ever tried to get a wheelchair into this building or is dependent on their own strength, they will know quickly that the grade of the ramp is not it's not friendly. And if you were to let a wheelchair go with a person, which that almost happened, that person would clearly be in jeopardy trying to get down the ramp. And so we definitely need an improvement. I will tell you, since the money was appropriated, the architect that we were hoping to have, who did our library and had helped us with doing some design estimates when we were looking at maybe purchasing the Santander Bank next door, he was not able to do it. They had a significant family illness, and we felt we weren't ready for it at that time, and there were some other projects that we wanted to get done. But putting this back on the radar, you know, one of the things that I wanted to share with you is some of the kind of proposals that he started to make me think about. This isn't just about a concrete ramp. It's about the whole back side of the building and how you enter into the building. And once you're in the building, how does that help somebody who has significant physical challenges? And so moving here, I did think it was important to show you, because we just walk in here every day. And until you're actually looking at the actual ramp, you'll start to say, geez, it doesn't look so bad. But it's not just about the looks of it. I'm providing you with some of the areas where you can see degradation, where you can see deep cracking that's near our railing and supports. You can see rebar rusting. You can also see that we have asphalt in the lower part of the ramp that is also cracking. We do our best to try to keep making improvements to it, but even where you see some of the patching that's been done, obviously it's exactly what it is. It's a patch. It's not an answer for long term. And so by providing some of this, you can see that the deterioration runs both linear and horizontal to the ramp, in the way the ramp is configured, because it comes in as a Z in the back for those people who are not here. And you can also see where former support posts were located, which is not the best for looking at the entire ramp and what that can do for existing deterioration and depression in the concrete itself. So I only provide this as a backup to be able to see why we're having some significant issues. The other thing is, if you start to look at where mortar is missing from the exterior wall and also caulking on the way we come into the building, the reason why I'm bringing this to your attention is because once you see that it was redesigned, and actually the first ADA one we did was in 1980, that is over 40 years, and this project with the ramp was configured for that. We wanted to show by example. I think that's Kenny, who does our maintenance. We did have a wheelchair that we borrowed from the senior center, so we could show you what it's like to try to get in the back. You cannot get down the back hallway when you're coming in, definitely with a wheelchair coming at you. So we started thinking, is it just about the ramp? I did anyway. I don't want to throw money just at a ramp and still have the problem when someone comes in the building. So we started to have this architect. He said, what would be really nice is the front of your building is so beautiful. The back of your building is really ugly. And if you look at it, it's not untrue. We have the big curve in the middle of it that's a spiral staircase that goes down to the vault. You have to remember that people who have disabilities are coming in when there's inclement weather. We've had meetings up here and it starts sleeting, and we've had members of boards and commissions that are in wheelchairs. And, we don't always have our maintenance people out, every hour making sure that a ramp is clear. Eventually, we get them to it if we have, a storm that we know is approaching. But it represents real challenges to people who are trying to be as independent as possible, and also represents slip hazards to people who are helping people who aren't as physically capable. So this notion that could we actually create, schematically, could we actually redo the ramp, do it at the grade that it's supposed to be so that it isn't really dangerous, and also at the same time perhaps give some way in the entryway and create a regular pathway instead of everyone going up the ramp to come enter into the building, and give it maybe a little architectural flair. This obviously is not the design. This was something that I asked him when I was applying for an ADA grant of $250,000, which we will continue to do, that once we show we have some skin in the game, typically that's when the Mass Office for Disability will help us. I will remind the committee that as I was trying to show that the town had a commitment to disability for these grants, I had applied a number of times for a ADA planning grant, and we just got that through a best practice grant program. I had applied in September, and lo and behold, that wasn't the Mass Office for Disability, but it was the Community Compact Grant. So the Commission for Disability is going to undertake this probably 10-month planning ordeal, which is going to look at all of our buildings, and I can tell you right now, this building will be one of those. And it may put us on a better radar for a major construction project. So it always comes down to what are we talking about for money. This was just to show you that we have some ability to look at what exists and what we might need to do. So obviously we have a lot more planning to do. So before we go on to the next thing, I'll go back up to here. Let me kind of talk a little bit about where I think we're going to be at. And in terms of timing, I don't think it will take a full year for the architect who seemed to be ready to come back and do some of this design work for us. I left in your packet what I had entered in and the architect had put together 2 years ago for what the cost would have been to actually make this major construction improvement on the back of the building. And back then, it was about $352,000. That was doing the big glass enclosure and things like that. Looking and framing where overall construction costs are, coming in, when I asked him, he said you probably are looking more at like $500,000 from the 352, not only because of inflation, but the overall, costs that are incurred and the backlog because of COVID. So that is what we anticipate the overall construction cost would be. Now, if we apply again and we show we have an ADA plan that's going to be updated, and two, have put money towards this planning phase and also for design and engineering of the building, improvement on the back, along with the ramp, then I think we have a better shot. So even though I'm saying it may cost 500,000, I'm always hoping for the next piece of assistance. So I'm hoping that we could get at least half of that funded through grants. And so, but do I think in about 10 to 12 months, we'd have a proposal that would need to be, considered heavily at that time to make this improvement? I do. And so that's why I put it here, so that, whether it's in the spring or maybe in the fall, when we're looking at what we have for funding, I wanted the Finance Committee to know that it's on our radar. I expect that the actual design and engineering piece will be done. And this is to keep it fresh in everybody's mind, that it's not gonna go away, and we hope that it will, happen in the not-so-distant future. And this would be, along with the improvements that we've made, a huge, this is our major town building, and it really needs to have that ability to, be welcoming to all people as they enter in. And that is the, predominant way that somebody who has the inability to come up the front steps, that's their view of Town Hall, so. And maybe we can have them also take a look at the fact that, on the first floor, we have only what used to be a little tiny conference room, which is now, because we needed space for our employees and staff, that may be, an area that we have to think about reconfiguring to make that thing wider. That's a whole nother piece of it that we have to talk with the architect about, but having said that, we'll have a better idea.
So that was my next question, was this doesn't include the hallway, the narrow hallway or any of that?
No, and that's something that has become more apparent as we started looking at the buildings and saying, okay, what can we do? But it's not impossible to think about widening it as you come up. We have two offices that are on the left. One is the human resource specialist, and the next one is the town clerk, and then part of the town clerk's office. So that would be an area that we'd have to think about. But if that were the case, we may have to think about widening on the exterior of the building, which there's plenty of space to do that when you're looking at the back side of the building over here. It's just the dumpsters are there, and there are some parking spaces. But how that would aesthetically tie in, I will tell you that if I go back to the first slide, you'll see the flat roofs. Well, you can kind of see it, I'm sorry. But where the window is, that's a flat roof. We had a lot of problems with that. We finally kind of got it resolved with some rubberized membrane. And then the other flat part, you see where the curve is, that, is where our vault area is. And then the roof behind that curved thing is all flat. So could we actually take this left-hand portion and extend it out? There's a lot of possibilities there. We have a lot of people who come up here. One of our busiest offices, our building department or Office for Land Management, and we have a lot of people who come up for permitting and things. So, is there a possibility of creating something that's more customer friendly for people who are in and out of this building a lot, looking to gather their permits and drop off information for our commissioner? Could be. But again, that's all, we haven't gotten to that stage of it. But it's good to think about even, maybe by doing that, sometimes when you don't do something, like make that improvement, sometimes it costs more because you're trying to retrofit to an old frame or an old structure versus you tear that down or you bust a wall out and all of a sudden it isn't as expensive. So I don't have the answer for that yet, but I would hope that we would get that from, a more comprehensive design and engineering.
What is that little building right there, that outbuilding?
Right now, that's the office for our for HR. And, we moved it and positioned it so
Interesting. I
that
didn't even pick up on
retirees
that.
and
Okay.
employees
I see the
can come
door
in.
when you go
Yep.
in the room. Yeah, okay.
I know, it looks a lot bigger there, doesn't it? It's really not. It's very small.
But you'd lose some of that space if you widen the hallway.
Right. So that's why I think you would have to go, see where the dumpsters are.
Yeah, you'd have to go
might
out.
need-
Expand the exterior.
Well, because the only other alternative is if you go to the right, that's where our vault system is. And so maybe there's a whole nother, aspect to what does that mean, I mean, that weird round thing is,
The
spiral
staircase
staircase
down,
into
yeah.
the vault, right? So, it has to be kind of looked at in a different way. So that's why we have architects in the world, because they can look at something and say, you know, so I needed that schematic sketch rather quickly for the first time grant there. And I was just like amazed, because I was like, I wouldn't have thought about that, a glassed enclosure, and, you know, and so it could be really quite lovely, considering where we were at from 40 to 50 years
Be in the
ago.
back of the building. Historically, we wouldn't be running into any issues with the building itself. We could tuck it in and,
I think so, because we did come across some of the original schematic drawings. It was like 181 pages when I think when they originally put that part of the building on, not this part. So I think we could do that. I mean, certainly the stuff that's, you know, from the main portion out is not architecturally historic, right? But it's a matter of being able to figure out how can we make some of that work. And maybe relocating things. It just becomes part of the nature of the beast.
hopefully, you could pick up some space too
Mm-hmm.
in the process,
Make it more accessible.
you know.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, you know, it's something that has worked for a period of time, but 1980 to now is a long time, you know, so. And if we could do something that would actually help with our future maintenance costs, because we know, or even is Mike Lucas still here? Oh, yeah, there you are, and Lucas. So we're like Lupus and Lucas, I always like. So I think Mike would tell you, it took us a long time to try to finally get that roof from leaking, and it was a constant problem. I'm talking about the roof on that's flat, not that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so even if we could put in what we consider to be a more gable type roof, it would work out better, you know. So, but there we go. I'd be happy to answer any more questions on that, if you guys are okay.
Just one other question.
Sure, go
for me
ahead.
Is, just to clarify, it's still ADA compliant currently, the ramp, or is the grading no
You have to
longer
remember,
compliant?
we put that in at a time where
80s,
that
yeah.
was what was considered to be ADA
Exactly.
compliant. But
Yeah.
I would venture to say through AAB, the Architectural Access Board and others, that they would say that the grade is too
Too
steep.
severe, right?
Yeah, it's
That's
too
what I was
severe.
thinking.
Yeah, like I said, it shouldn't be something where if you let go of a wheelchair with someone in, that you just go
Oh,
flying
yeah,
down.
some of those wheelchairs are very heavy too, so trying to push it up that.
So that would be, yeah, that would be, I think, the other thing. And it's not just for wheelchairs, it's also for people who have, you know, a physical,
Yep.
you know, disability.
Walkers.
And is the handrail at an appropriate height and all of
Yes.
that? I mean, we're no different than any other community. Oftentimes, you know, we have, you know, either local vendors or someone who might have cut a break, you know, to the town years ago and, you know, did the pipe railing. You know, there weren't many people who did pipe railing, and they weren't necessarily doing it all for ADA compliance. I would have hoped that in 1980, because we were doing it with some grant money, that the former town manager, at least they had the foresight to say, let's try to make accessibility an important thing. And we did for a period of time, and it has served the needs of the town, certainly for a long period of time. But like anything, after 50 years, we have to take another look at it.
Yes.
All right, move to the next item, and that was something that, just so you know, sometimes I'll have dialogues with my department heads, and I kept saying, I know I'm missing something, you know, Jared, we're missing something that we're working on that is getting ready to bear fruit, to be able to start to really kind of share it with the broader public. And you may have read in the newspaper recently, there was a little article that was about the OBA doing this little park here on the side. And there was some reference about how the town is working on a bike trail, or some of their members are working on a bike trail with the town. So I said, well, you know, part of that is true, and part of it is where the town is actually taking a strong lead. So I wanted to talk to you about this, because it is something that is going to be, I think, a major enhancement recreationally to the community, and it ties in it ties in very closely to what we just did at town meeting in the fall. And that was to acquire 82 Charlton Street with the little building there, to eventually make that into you know, a visitor center, a little educational place, a little recreational place. But it was done also within the understanding that we were looking at this much larger vision. Our conservation agent, much to her hard work, had always been thinking about this trail from a conservation perspective as it goes by some wetlands, and it was a way to think about, tying into nature and the environment. And Judy had taken what was an abandoned rail line that a lot of people don't realize that had gone in from one end of the town all the way up to Auburn. And this abandoned rail line, we started to, think about conceptual, that if you were to look at this, it would be something that would be an amazing project, not just for the town of Oxford, although most of it runs through the town of Oxford, but it also is 5 separate sections that run over 8 miles long. So it's a continuous, long bike trail, and we don't have a lot of those areas left in Massachusetts to kind of think about this. So obviously, there are a lot of trail grants out there, there are a lot of recreation grants, but in order to kind of tap into those, one, you have to show what are you talking about, and 2, you have to look at a lot of things from acquisition rights and the amount of acquisitions that you have to take, and what else it goes with it. So let me take you that this is not something that's going to happen in 1 year. It's not something that's going to happen in 2 years. I, as a former lawmaker, was a very strong supporter of forming the Blackstone Valley Bikeway. And believe it or not, after getting significant money, millions, to actually do the first 2 phases out of Blackstone, it took 10 years to do 3.2 miles. But that was over railroad trestle bridges and through the downtown and out into another continuous town. So when I was a town administrator, I got to cut the ribbon as it came through the town. I was the town administrator, but before that, there was a lot of difficulties in acquiring the land and who was really in charge of it. Those things have all been kind of, I call them settled with the state. The Department of Conservation and Recreation and the Department of Transportation now work hand in glove. So we knew that if we were going to take this wonderful idea of 8 miles, where do we start? Well, obviously, we want to start sometimes in the path of least resistance and stuff that might be doable. So when you're proposing a multimodal trail, there's a bunch of different things you can do. I think some people have an idea that if you're going to create a trail, it's going to be like all the other kind of mid-state trails and everything. It's going to be, a trail that has, some kind of gravel base, and it is just running through the woods. We don't envision that to be as accessible and as user-friendly, and it will not generate the same kind of experience that you would want to go from one section. This goes all the way really to the Connecticut border. We don't have other trails that really go to that unless they're being used for a variety of things. For horseback riding, that's why I looked at you. Horseback riding, trails, off-road, bicycles, things like that. But when you start talking about people who have disabilities or people who are looking for passive recreation that can't be on uneven ground and things, you start talking about a paved way. Now, if this was a terrible 8-mile stretch and it was really difficult to do, I'd be the last person to want to get behind the project because I know how difficult and how expensive even a half a mile can be. But what's nice about this, and the reason why I'm starting to talk about it, because we're going to have a lot of conversations about this as we go by in the future, and we're going to have a lot of conversations with people in a lot higher office than we are here, trying to get funding for this project, and also showing that we will, help shepherd it as best as possible and maybe make some contributions. So if you're going to propose to construct something like this, design and engineering are important. And this fact that this will access the Mid-State Trail, the Army Corps, because it goes from Webster all the way up to Auburn. The big thing here is, I said there weren't a lot of land acquisition issues because the National Grid basically owns the majority of it. Mm-hmm. That is unheard of. They bought it up years ago and we have already started to have the dialogue with both the state. I've already had dialogues with the district director, their front people for bike paths and trails, and also National Grid. So we're already into those discussions. And what we're hoping is that we are in the process of trying to use some resources locally to look at each one of these sections and to start to map them out. If you were to look at it, I've provided you with some evidence of, areas where you would break up this trail. The best thing for us to do, because we've already made this investment in 82 Charlton, would be, let's take a look at that area going south towards Webster. And if you start with that, then you start to say things might be doable. And they might be doable because they don't require as much major infrastructure, and you don't have to worry about treading necessarily in a lot of areas where there's acquisition or easement issues. And so if you looked at what we had as a draft river trail phase, which goes back to the spring, you can see that, in Judy's mind, she referred to developing Section 2 and Section 3, calling it Phase 1 and Phase 2. I would say that that is kind of accurate. It's talking about starting up here in Charlton and going south, maybe all the way to where the animal control, animal shelter building is, right, in that vicinity. And so that's, approximately like a 2-mile stretch. And if you're looking at bikeways, in general, bikeways, you look at the cost per mile, you're usually talking, in generalities, depending on what the topography is and the terrain and the issues that you might have with that. Does it need any little footbridges? Does it need a major, bridge? You can build a bike path anywhere. The bigger challenge is having the vision and the desire to actually make it happen. But in this case, we don't see a lot of that, and we have actually the ability that if we looked at something that might be really expensive to do to get over some kind of hurdle, that we have ways around it that would be less expensive. But in general, a mile is usually computed out to be about $3 million. Okay, because they look at everything from design, engineering, construction, acquisition, all of those things. Can it be less? Absolutely. But that's, looking nationally, that's kind of the stretch. So if you would look at, 2-mile stretch, and when you think about it, you go, oh, just 2 miles. If you've ever been on one of these bike paths, it's really lovely to think about, but it's more important to think about the kind of use that it will get and what you get back for it. So if we were looking at a cost estimate of that for that, say, a 2-mile section, you'd say, okay, if we're looking for design and engineering, usually you'd say 10% of regular building projects and things like that, sometimes higher for being able to take a portion of that. So if you look at this as a multi-year, I put in here that, yes, we're going to look at grants. Yes, we're going to look at potential other sources. But for design and engineering for year 24 would be about, if you looked at 6 million, would be about 300,000. And for fiscal year 25 would be the other 300,000 instead of trying to do it all at once. Again, these are parameters. We haven't put out, a request for proposals for that piece of it, but it's just giving you an idea that if we were to prep for that and if we were to get ourselves ready, that's when we can go after much bigger money. And it's interesting because since we've had our little meetings with the state, and I actually challenged our district director, who lives right over in Auburn, who actually uses and runs, much sometimes to his chagrin, on the trail that goes through the Army Corps, because sometimes it's very uneven and it's,
Muddy.
he did, when I challenged him, I said, wouldn't it be great, wouldn't it be great as, as professionals who've worked in the area for government for a long time, to have this real gem developed, in the last Green Valley, along the French River, connecting our communities that already we consider ourselves connected, but sometimes we don't get a lot of opportunities to do regional things. This would be something we could do, and it would be something that would be a real lasting legacy. He was game on for it because Tony Souza, our assistant town manager, I had him go just yesterday because I wasn't able to go to a trails seminar that the state was hosting with Senator Goby and some others. And Peter Sutton, who is the lead person for developing bike paths and trails, had no idea we had anybody in the audience, but he called out and said, is there anybody from Oxford here? And Tony said, I'm here. And out of nowhere, he said, well, they're talking about, already they're starting to look at doing something really exciting. And in a corridor of the state, we don't really have a lot of activity. and said that he wanted to really encourage us to take those next steps, to formulate the plan, because, we would be on target to be able to be eligible for some significant places where we should be applying for some grant money. And that's coming from the top leader who's been there for quite some time. And we have the DOT who's supportive. And if we can, when you bring people together that want to make something happen, they will. So, again, this is to start the dialogue. This is something to, to begin the discussion with. And then I really believe, as we're putting together our plan, I'll either have all the information in the pieces will fit together, or I'll say, no, not yet. It's going to be, in the fall, and we'll have more information. And then, my finance director will, be helping to work with me on trying to figure out ways to make that happen. But it is very exciting. But the only way to make this happen is you can get really so big, you can't do all 8 miles. And there are a lot of different challenges with different sections of this. But could it be done, and should it be done, it would be something that would be really astounding. It really would. And it would put not just Oxford on the map for its residents, but it would put it on for the next generation. I mean, going by areas that are historic, and nobody would have thought there was abandoned railroad line there. And it goes all the way up when you're going up Clara Barton Road. You can see the old abutments.
Yeah.
Yeah, going right up over where
Bridge
you
back
have
there.
the
Industrial Park.
yeah, the Bartlett Bridge, the Bartlett Dam there, and it goes all along there. So there's another way to think about not going directly right to the town border of Auburn. There's also another path that could be taken to go more towards and under, and that's going to be a discussion we'll have with DOT. They may be able to help put some infrastructure. Sometimes they put those half tunnels where you can, right under Route 20 where they're going to be building. So we might ask for that, even if we're not ready for it, where we have, the ability to go up towards, is it Texas Pond, Thayer Pond, Texas Pond, all the way up there, where that might be another entry point into it in the future. But like I said, all good plans need to have some attention to them, and they need time, and they need people with good vision. So I think we have some excellent energetic resources locally, but this will not be just a clearing of the brush and hope for the best that you can make it through the trail. It can't be that, because that raises all kinds of issues long-term about maintenance and sustainability and whether something is actually ever going to be used. And, so I think we have some excellent representatives at the federal level who will be very interested in this project. State level, obviously, they're already expressing, good interest in this. And, I think we have excellent staff who could be very resourceful and help put it on the map. So with that, if I can answer any questions about that, I will be more than happy to try to do that, but.
I just have one comment.
Sure.
My wife is actually one of those walkers every morning at 9:30 that starts either at the end of Rocky Hill Road where we live, or else Greenbrier.
Yeah.
And she's been doing this since COVID, so for 3 years. There are probably 30 or 40 people that she's met. Over half of those people don't even live in town. They're coming from Paxton, they're coming from Holden, they're coming from Millbury.
Sure.
So it's being used and it's recognized by people out of the area, which
Yes.
is phenomenal.
It is. And I think that speaks to all of those pieces. So, the town had the excellent, understanding that we had a valuable piece of property that could, be a jumping point. And, we talk a little bit about, we did apply for a rural assistance grant. We did not get it this round. We will apply again. But in case we don't, one of the things you want to do is, you don't want to hold up being able to make improvements, even to that little parcel, and we will do that. But that's why I say, I look at them kind of hand in glove. One is much more expensive. The other one, we've already made, the investment that we had to, which was very reasonable. And, and hopefully we can pull all those pieces together. And even if it's just, obviously, if it's not the full, 2 miles, if it's the first mile, You know, even people will say, well, who's gonna go for my, you'd be amazed. Or most of the time, you can't even cut the ribbon. People wanna use it. The minute you build it, they will use it. It's so
Well,
true.
Up
It's
and back
true.
is 2 miles, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. And that's great. That's great for anybody. And, you know, if you've ever seen, you know, people with disabilities on, you know, hand bikes and things like that, that they look for this. And we do not have many opportunities in this area at all. You can go to the Cape and get on a great bike trail. And, you know, there's some places in the state that made heavy investments in that. But this is like, it's like a gem waiting to happen. And it's there, it's been lying quiet, and, but it can really be such an asset. And it helps with even people, everyone sometimes says, well, what if you're located close to a bike trail? It actually makes people's values of their homes go up. Anytime they're located near a recreational resource, including bike paths, their actual property values go up, and their interest in their homes when they go to sell them, or, you know, people actually look for those kinds of things.
So you mentioned that National Grid owns the
Mm-hmm.
line. So is this something we'd be looking to acquire the land? I mean, what's generally done? They just lease it to us? Or-
Yeah, well, then it becomes one of those things. Those kinds of things can get sorted out in terms of they give you permission and easements, and access to use that. Sometimes depending on where you get the funding, you know, that becomes, you know, in terms of maintenance and who really takes control of that. So sometimes they'll build it, and then the state will go into some kind of relationship with, you know, maintenance that involves the local communities that the bike path goes through. So I don't really know what way it will be. It's too early in this phase to know, but the big thing here is sometimes it's difficult when you're talking to 50 property owners.
Right.
State, you know, in the case for the Blackstone Valley Bikeway, they had so many individual property owners that it was just going to be impossible for any volunteer group or anybody to even think about. And so the state had to come in and sort of make the deal to be able to acquire the properties so that the projects could go forward. But, you know, here we wouldn't have as much of that because the pathway that you need is really, that's why railroad beds, old,
Yeah.
make, you know, great bike paths because they typically are ready to go. It's just whether the bike path goes over major bridges and stuff, and that's when it can get expensive, or, you know, is winding along a coast and it had a, you know, a coastal footbridge that no longer exists, and you gotta get over that, to keep it away from, main roads. But, you know, and this also, again, plays into, if it's multimodal, it's part of our economic development, you know, as we go forward. It's part of our recreation. I'm sure, you know, when you start to talk about, you know, what could you do with something like this, then you'll find that the school, you know, children and the school departments then develop, you know, activities that relate, you know, to whatever you have as a resource. And, you know, that becomes one of the things too. And you don't know where it's gonna go, but economic development-wise and resource-wise, it helps bring people downtown. When anybody's going for, especially if they are from out of the state or out of town, they're gonna look for someplace to go get a snack. They're gonna look to go get an ice cream. They're gonna say, geez, I just cut my, you know, my finger on my derailleur when I was doing something on my bike, and I gotta go to CVS and get a Band-Aid. I mean, that's all, you don't know what the purpose is. Somebody wants to go have a, you know, a beverage, they're gonna go someplace locally. And if it's all beautiful, pristine kind of property that you're traversing through as, on a bike, the only jump points off are into the town center. And that's helpful to everybody, so. Anyway, I've talked at nauseam.
Well, Judy presented this to the Master Implementation Committee.
Yes.
About 8 months ago, and she took the whole conference table with the large map and alluded that the National Grid would be on board for a lot of this. They would be willing to listen and work with us. And the Army Corps of Engineers as well, between Hodges and Buffinville.
Yes, I
And
mean,
you alluded to the fact that it goes to Connecticut, and of course, the Army Corps of Engineers, that's why the
Right
dams
there.
are built for the flooding of the Connecticut Valley. It continues on, so people could take, if we did, you know, everybody could leapfrog and take a piece.
Right.
And take ownership to their piece.
Sure.
And it could evolve into something much greater than what this could be the seed going
Yes.
forward. I know that my son visited us this summer, and he remarked, he said, I'm amazed how beautiful this area is. And we went for a 3.1 mile walk, and I literally, he said, you know, we're going 3.1 miles. I said, yeah, well, we have to go back.
There you go, there you go.
But we did, and he was over the moon, saying, you know, geez, that's a beautiful piece of real estate out here, and made that comment to me, and we enjoyed it, and he enjoyed it, and so I know this is an opportunity to move forward on this and really get other stakeholders involved, and it could turn out to be over time something more than what we were originally envisioned it to be.
Sure. And until you show some of the, anybody can kind of talk about this and draft and show little things like that, but, the state and federal, they're gonna ask, okay, really, what's the real price tag? What's the real, impediments structurally that we have to encounter? And those are the kinds of things that you have to sort of lay out for them. And if you get to an impasse, but once you've done a fair amount of, information building to actually to support a project, then it's so much easier. It's so much easier, I'm not gonna say to sell, but it's so much easier to convey, to show the worthiness of it and show that it has merit. Because we're not the only ones who would like some kind of trail money or state funding.
Sure.
But when you talk about a magnificent continuous project like this, the contiguous nature of it makes it
And
that
the
much more.
opportunity to
Yeah.
leverage it beyond.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think it would be great. But anyway, I think we wanted to at least put it forward so that people, we will have community meetings going forward. This is the beginning to have those, kinds of conversations. The one thing you rather have is some kinds of parameters of where you're looking and what you're trying to do. And this is the only way to kind of do it. But those next steps, just like the Lowe's Pond Dam, and we'll have those community, I call them community education forum building kind of sessions to talk more about that. Okay?
Okay, well, thank
All
you
right,
so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
You too.
All right. Next item on our agenda is upcoming meetings, and we won't have anything
Until budget meetings.
starting
End of February?
sometime in February,
Yep, mid to late February.
mid to late February.
I did want to bring to the committee's attention that I'm going on vacation at the end of February.
All right.
So I know we
Oh.
have a small core of people. I just wanted to bring that up, that I'll be out of town probably the last week of February.
Okay.
So when we're planning.
Yeah, and I know that I'm going to be gone out of country in April. I'm not sure which week, either the third or the fourth week of April,
Yep.
for 7 days or longer.
Yeah, mine's a long trip too.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so maybe we want to start a little earlier, but that puts onus on the departments
Sure.
to put their budgets together. So I know
Yeah.
that affects every department head as well, but,
Exactly. Yeah.
just want to, I don't know, if Mark or John, you have any commitments, family or anything?
I spent all my money last year, so.
That's right, Disney. Yeah.
No, I don't know.
I just want to, so that we're ready for May 5th, and we're not giving anybody a short shift,
I don't have nothing then.
but, and maybe we could do, maybe, instead of a 2 hour, maybe a 2.5 hour meeting if we had to on one or 2 weeks, not every week, but,
No, I know we've done like a Saturday meeting
well, that was
before, too.
DPW, because
Yeah.
there's extensive budget,
Yes,
because they,
that's an option too, if
yeah.
everyone was okay
Yeah,
with
we'd be
it.
open to that if the department head would be open to
if
that.
needed,
Yeah,
yeah.
if needed. Because we want to make sure we do diligence and
Right.
listen and take notes and ask questions so that we're
Sure.
prepared for town meeting.
Hopefully we get more bodies by then.
Well, that's
Yeah, the other thing too, yeah, hopefully that between now and then, where there's more than 4 of us,
Yeah, that would be nice.
that would be.
That
This
would
way,
be
if somebody gets sick,
And how many openings? We have 2 openings? 3
Three.
openings.
3,
In case someone's listening online and they're interested in volunteering.
yeah. All right, well, that being said, I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Everybody, happy holidays.
You too.
Yeah.